Welcome everybody to our Solve Climate by 2030 event, which is also our somewhat usual our energy policy research group event here at CEU. And we have a really good turnout, so I want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm Michael LaBelle. I'm an associate professor here at CEU, or I guess it doesn't matter where we are. But I work in the economics and business department and also the environmental science and policy department too. So, and I'm really happy here to have a really great group of panelists who have been actually working with closely over the past few months and years, many years actually for a couple of them. And Colin, I know from his exchange with CEU, his virtual exchange, which I was a bit dubious about at the beginning, but actually now I think we've all experienced this past year and have been amazed, I would say, by the connections we can establish even by Zoom. I realize it's not as I don't know, now we can say as great or as interesting as in person, but I think this virtual connection really has exceeded our expectations, at least. And certainly for events like this, this way to communicate and to touch, I think, a lot of people's lives, regardless of where people are, is also very effective. So I know we've been able to step up here at EPRG as well. So with that, I just want to also give it a brief introduction and tell you how we're going to operate today. So joining us first is Anna Stojilovska. She's doing her PhD here with me at CEU, and so she's hopefully going to be finishing soon. I won't put pressure on her. But we also have Colin Kimbrell, and he's a PhD researcher at Macedonia University in the Czech Republic. And it's in the chat. He's just published an article about electric vehicles. So I encourage everyone to click on that and take a look. And then we also have Roxana Bucata, and she's a freelance journalist and communicator in Romania. She's also a graduate of CEU. And I'll say that she is enrolling next year as also a PhD student here at CEU. So we have a lot of connections here. And I think this actually displays quite well the research that we do at CEU and also those connected with CEU. So and our topic today, of course, is just transition in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think this is really important that we're focusing on specific countries and specific cases, because when we talk about a just transition, we can be very abstract as well, which of course is important. But also I think, and what makes it more interesting is to bring real stories to life, really, and to describe those and to examine what is a just transition and what it is for we could say average people. So what we're going to do is I'm going to be moderating it. And first, I see we have a special video because this is a part of the Climate 2030 initiative. And in that video, they'll outline why this is a special global event. And then let's see here. And then what we'll do is just go in the order of the panelists. And each panelist has about 10 to 15 minutes to give a presentation. And then we're going to take questions from you. But I also like to break this up. So maybe we could have one or two short questions after each presentation. And you can feel free to write those in the chat. So when the speaker is done speaking, then we can turn to them and ask them just a few questions before we move on to the next one. And then we'll have a full discussion at the end as well too. So and that I would like to open up and have people talking to each other. So that's kind of the outline for today. And I need to also thank Varvara Aleksik, because she also put a lot of time and effort along with Anna in organizing this event. And also we have Sabrina and Lucia, which may or may not be here, I can't see. And so I want to thank them for also really supporting EPRG this past year. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Varvara because I think she's the one doing the videos.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome all to our Solve Climate Change by 2030 event. And now I would share my screen in order to show you a video from the Bard College initiator of this event. And I will just like to invite you to check their website, Solve Climate Change by 2030, where you can see also other events which are organized throughout whole this week. But I hope you can see my screen, and I will play now the video.
Welcome to the Solve Climate Global Dialogues. You're participating in one of 125 events held across the planet, including in almost all 50 US states, part of a global project called Solve Climate by 2030. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I'm an economist and director of the Graduate Programs in Sustainability at Bard College in New York, the lead organizer for Solve Climate. This last year has been difficult for everyone. As the world looks forward to recovery from COVID, we are focusing tonight on the most important question facing humanity. What can we do in this year in our regions to help solve climate change while supporting struggling communities that have faced widespread loss of life, economic disaster, and joblessness? Worldwide, from Australia to Kyrgyzstan, from Colombia to Malaysia, and from South Carolina to South Africa, Solve Climate audiences are hearing from local experts and young leaders about concrete steps that can really help nations solve climate change while creating much needed jobs and incomes for everybody. The year 2020 was one of the 2 hottest years in human history, bringing with it massive forest and grassland fires, record-breaking storms and hurricanes, and relentless rising seas. Solving climate is the challenge which the human species must now face. There's hope for the future. Solutions have continued to advance. This year, China committed to building a carbon neutral economy, while the US rejoined the Paris Agreement. Solar, wind, and battery prices continue to fall, while major car companies have been rushing to electrify the global fleet. Worldwide, movements for Black Lives Matter and Me Too are leading in bringing much delayed and urgently needed justice to the world. Time is short. We have until 2030, 10 years to solve climate. We can get a lot done in this decade. We have the solutions, but only if we focus the world on climate solutions and justice, and then do the work we have to do in our own cities and regions. For students listening, you are the leaders. Without you, the future we envision will not come. I'm asking tonight for your help. We're going to discover powerful ideas for climate solutions and climate justice and how you can be a part of the solution. But this message must reach beyond those of us who are listening right now. Would you ask all your teachers this week in every subject to make climate a class? The teacher can assign tonight's webinars homework for the students, and then afterwards have a 1-class period discussion. And we mean every subject, from art to engineering, psychology to business, dance to chemistry. Teachers don't need to be a climate expert to lead a discussion about climate change. The Solve Climate Project has easy-to-use teacher's guides in nearly every subject and in 3 languages to help teachers make climate relevant to their class. It only takes courage. Don't take no for an answer. Ask them, why not? This is your future. You'll be surprised how many teachers will say yes and thank you. Imagine you, thousands of leaders like you around the world asking their teachers once every school term to make climate a class. That means every term going forwards, hundreds of thousands, millions of students worldwide in their classes talking about climate solutions. COVID has shown how fragile our global economy and society are to extreme events. It's also shown that vulnerable people are facing the hardest, most damaging impacts. This is also true with climate change. Science has made it clear that unchecked, global warming will mean an unending onslaught of extreme events, causing untold suffering for humanity and all creatures, species driven to extinction, a planet of environmental refugees. And yet, in many ways, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive as a human. We have the tools and networks and technologies to rewire the world with clean energy, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, and regenerate forests and grasslands, and be well on our way to solving climate by 2030. Tonight, we will learn how to do this in our own cities, our own towns, our own regions. Thank you for the work you will do to promote climate solutions and a just world.
Okay, it's a really nice message, and I think what is important about the message is how global both this event is, and of course, when we come to tackling global climate change, it's also a global solution. But it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's this local, right? This connection with people at a more local scale that needs to go ahead. So with that, I'm going to move to Anna first to give her presentation. Anna.
Okay, thank you. Just share my screen. Okay, I think it's okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm honored to participate in the discussion. So we kind of titled this empirical experiences from Central Eastern Europe, and I will just share some experiences from North Macedonia and Austria, countries in which I've done my empirical work for my PhD and where I draw the experience. But the message what I want to send is kind of a very aligned with what was already mentioned in the video. So I'm glad we're on the same page. So the first thing that my view of the energy transition or all these strives about attempts to solve climate, which I kind of see it's really about at least this EU-led energy transition, is that it's overwhelmingly focused on technology and fuels. And we know that actually in the system, at the heart of the system, are the people and the institutions, which are, according to Michael's book, a part of a specific energy culture. And everyone, this I've also drawn on this what was mentioned is justice, energy justice concept, which says that it is about that everyone has the right not just to access energy, but certain qualities added to the energy, affordable, safe, and clean energy. It's really a visionary idea. But on the other hand, we have around 50 million people across Europe who are affected by energy poverty. And that means they do not have enough energy in sense of not enough to satisfy their socially and material needs in households. So basically I love this word vulnerable. I mean, it's a bad word, but I like the focus that it puts. And actually the COVID crisis has really shown this, how certain groups of us can be more vulnerable when you're doing fine, but when there are a certain threat that comes, then you're kind of a bit more, you're a bit more at risk, either of poverty. And but here what I want to point out is that being vulnerable to energy poverty especially prevents you to participate actively in the energy transition. So it's because you're either so preoccupied with satisfying your energy needs or your day-by-day needs at kind of a household level, you're not able, or you're prevented or do not have the means to participate. So let me just show you what I mean by these energy vulnerable people. I'll just show you briefly two examples of households of which I've talked to. So this is a citation of a single female pensioner living in Skopje who has some health problems and uses fuel wood. She says that she uses fuel wood just to heat one room, and for the other rooms, she has electric heater. She always pays the energy bills first and uses only on Sunday the oven when there is a cheap electricity tariff, and she economizes. And she even says that she finds this situation of being sick and by that needing to spend her winter at the daughter's place, and her daughter uses warm heating, that actually this is a good thing for her because she kind of escaped this living in this cold room. And on the other hand, so if this is Eastern Europe or Southeast Europe, we have also in Central Europe, in Austria, happening vulnerable people that are living. So this is a female pensioner who is of Polish origin and lives in Vienna. She's on a minimal pension and has health issues, and she says that she stops heating in April. and she economizes on electricity, and it's for her too expensive to heat, and her apartment is cold. But then she would definitely go hungry, but first she wants to pay the energy bills because she can lose the flat. So then I kind of, with help of this energy justice concepts and energy poverty, I kind of addicted into what does it mean. Energy poverty literature has definitely put focus on to, okay, first we are preoccupying with the previous profiles of who are these vulnerable people, how do they live in badly insulated dwellings and so on. But then lately, what I really like is that the discussions went into onwards to seeing, okay, who is making these people trapped in the situation that they are? Are there any institutional path dependencies that keep them locked in? And then there is this increased interest that, wait, like these are the vulnerable people, but what about the institutions, policies, and processes that enable this to happen, or actually does not allow them to get out of the situation? And then the idea that we need to balance, it's not all about having the photovoltaics or having this nice electric cars or fancy things maybe, but it's just how to balance environmental, economic, social, political goals. It's not about just achieving some renewable energy share. It's about also making sure that it is a just process. It is a fair process. And then in line with that, there is also a lot of literature that focuses on citizens. So this is what we are here, what you, some of you, if you're a student, what you can do, or also what people do. They go out on the street and protest. They participate in social movements, they demand. And there is even an initiative or organizations pulling this right to energy, which also definitely got a momentum during the crisis. It says that, hey, it's not about, it's right to energy, something even like right to housing, something like it's a human right. Some argue that there should be some kind of a basic energy supply that should be, or basic energy services that should be available to citizens, and everyone should have. So these are some discussions going on at the European level. And what they focus out that these people who cannot afford energy services, sometimes it's not just because they're poor, but because there are monopolies and in unjust policies that do not allow these people out of the situation. And there is also, I'm kind of picking up on, there's this lack of profiling of these institutions who are maybe contributing to this energy poverty being not tackled or even increasing, especially in time of COVID. So just to tell a little bit about the cases. So North Macedonia, post-socialistic country, there is a bigger share of energy poverty, and it's kind of because of a high share of material deprivation, inefficient housing stock, and there's also cheap energy, and these are subsidized prices, but also at the same time still expensive for the citizens. But what I focus here and want to point out is that citizens also suffer from injustices of the monopolies, energy monopolies, which are in private ownership. And on the other hand, we have a weak social welfare system, which does not help them to balance these high energy prices for them. And we have Austria, who is a bit of a better case, that there is a much lower share of energy poverty, and we have a much better developed social welfare system and kind of initiatives even of the energy regulator to prepare an informal definition of energy poverty. So I'm just going to show briefly what kind of people were trying to do to face these injustices. So in case of Austria, I talked to one of the biggest public energy utility, and this is what they said. So they had a ombudsman representative within the utility, and this is what we said. They said, we work on the open market, but we work for the citizens. It is not about we don't want to have a consumer who won't be able to buy energy anymore. So in this, I really saw there a really high awareness that there will be some people who won't be able to afford energy, and that they should, and that the role of the utility should enable or a kind of a find a solution to everyone. And just to point out briefly that they've made a really complex definition of, they call it severe social welfare consumer case, who then if they tick certain criteria, then they would be able to kind of have some kind of a time to pay their bills. So it's not about not paying the bills. In this case, they took the approach, it's not about that this citizen would be forgiven their energy bills, but just enabling a bit of a human approach to when you are in a certain circumstances. Also, COVID is definitely the case, that you'll be able still to have a dignified life, by that to have access to the basic energy services. And on the other hand, we have in North Macedonia a bit of a different situation. So this is from the independent ombudsman saying that criticizing the low social welfare, that it's not effective to get people out of poverty, and then they do not have normal life, even do not have they cannot even pay the food and clothes rather than electricity and district heating. So this is something that's going on in over years, noted by the ombudsman, who really points out that the monopolies who actually enforce these, and no other stakeholders help this. And these are just the posters about people who a few years back, they went on the streets, they started to protest. Maybe you've not heard about the cases in North Macedonia, but maybe you've heard about the cases in Bulgaria, cases in Barcelona, that actually people went on the street and protested against high energy prices, which are maybe result of monopolies misusing their situation. And then just at the end, to kind of give up, to come to the conclusion. So definitely my take on this energy transition is that the justice element is very keen. And then here we conclude that there are certain institutional setups for energy poverty drivers, and that the current system allows and co-produces energy poverty. So we should agree, change the system, or at least rethink how the system works, in a sense of especially pointing out, is energy a commodity, or it's should we challenge this? Is it only a commodity that you pay for? Is it something a bit more significant to human life? Then when we decide about energy projects, do we think about efficiency, about cost benefits measurements, or do we think about equity? Do we think about the aspect of the human development embedded into these definitions? And at the end of the day, is a citizen only a consumer, or is it a citizen? Is it, are we citizens with also voting rights, right to protest, right to participate, and so on, or we're just consumers of energy? And then in North Macedonia, the case was that we had monopolies who misused the situation, and citizens who are even not poor, they can face issues of not being able to pay the energy bills. And on the other hand, in Austria, we have kind of a bit of a different situation in which the energy suppliers have shown a bit of awareness that yes, the problem should be solved. They're not radical. They should be solved on the liberalized market, but enabling a little bit of a human approach. And then just to conclude about the energy transition. So this energy transition, this climate change, kind of mitigating focused energy transition should be definitely take into account the social aspects of it. In order to be inclusive, we just cannot go forward with some people who will be able to benefit of it and some who will not. And this means that we need to, there need to be institutional will to support households to participate, especially the vulnerable households. And at the end of the day, this just institutional setup requires that we have deeper structural reforms. So that is my presentation. Thank you very much. And I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Yeah, we give the virtual applause, and everything. So there's our claps for you. Okay. Does anyone have a first question, a short question to ask Anna? I'm happy to ask you a question, Anna, till we get one more question, at least from the audience. The role of institutions is really important in your research and in your presentation there. I would say how, and maybe you can't answer this fully, but how much can people create change for institutions or pressure institutions to change to become much more human facing, kind of like the Austrian regulator you have there?
I think this is a very, very key question, and this is more, I would say, not like that we academics like to give, like to find a problem and then leave the hard work to students, activists, and so on. But I would say that anyone that they can, from their own point of view, if you're now like also talking to students, I think it's important if we talk about these things, if we then, because I mentioned we are citizens, right? At the end of the day, you're a citizen, maybe you're a mother, maybe you're a voter, and so on. So we can use all these qualities to enforce. And I would say you have the right to vote, you have the right to protest, hopefully many countries. You have the right also about like some even students or citizens, they sue their own country. So they use different agreements, international agreements, so that they can rely on. Barbara probably knows much more legal background, like that they can use this to basically sue the government. But at the same time, I think it's also important to be able to co-educate ourselves, so like educate also our kind of co-citizens or in our neighborhood in order to do this. But definitely it is something that I think we should use all our qualities to pressure into this, and definitely activism. It's also, I would say, one good way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions from the audience for right now? Everyone's silent. Okay, with that then, I'm going to move over to, I think, Colin. Sorry, I had a bit of computer problems disconnecting. Yeah, Colin's in the order. So Colin, I'll turn it over to you for
Okay.
your. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me share my presentation, and hopefully everyone can see it now. All right, great.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll be talking about the case of Czech Republic. And in some ways, it is a bit similar to Austria in that it's one of the more developed countries in this particular region. Energy poverty is not such an issue in Czech Republic as it is in some other countries in this region. But in other ways, it's much different from Austria. And to quote the dude from the Big Lebowski, it's a very complicated case, a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous. And the reasons for these complications actually, to a large extent, stem from the institutional factors that are involved. So there will be that thematic similarity with what Anna was talking about. So thank you for the good introduction, Anna. And the first complication basically comes with the term just transition. And unfortunately, the Czech Republic is a case where we can't really yet quite talk about a just transition, because first we need to deal with the energy transition aspect of the energy system. And so that's where I'm going to start, by kind of basically trying to unpack some of these complications and to give you kind of an overall picture of the Czech energy system, where it is now and where it's heading, and how we can maybe change that. And so when we look at Czech energy policy, there are some kind of background drivers that determine Czech energy policy. And the ones that I'll be focusing on especially are the traditions involved in the Czech energy system, the different agencies involved, especially the ministries, and then the kind of the current situation with the energy system, especially the status of main power utility sector actors. And so to kind of give you a general picture about the current situation in the Czech transition and in the Czech energy system, what we see here is the total energy supply in the Czech Republic by source. And so what you can see is coal has gone down considerably in terms of as a percentage of the total energy supply, but it still is a huge contributor. And the reduction in coal has mostly been replaced
Allô, est-ce que vous m'entendez, Marie?
by natural gas.
Moi, je vous entends pas et je ne vous vois pas.
By natural gas and nuclear power, to a lesser extent by biofuels and waste. And then down at the very, very bottom beneath oil, those are the renewables. To give you a slightly different look at the same information, but in terms of absolute values. So again, right, what we see is that coal has reduced significantly, but it is still far and away the biggest source of energy supply in the country. And again, you see that overall total energy supply has gone down, but natural gas has gone up slightly, nuclear has gone up, biofuels and waste have gone up, renewables much less so. And then looking more specifically at electricity generation, we see here that coal has gone down a little bit, but not as much as in the previous picture. And the gap has been made up to a large extent by nuclear power. And then again, down towards the bottom, we see that the third highest source is natural gas, followed by biofuels, and then other renewable sources. And so it's given the history of energy consumption in the country, and given the history and the current situation, then it's not really surprising that the vision for the country, as introduced by the Ministry of Industry and Trade in the State Energy Policy Update 2015, is rather conservative, and we could even say unambitious. And so you see in this table the current situation in 2015 versus what this plan proposes to achieve by 2040. And what you see is that, yes, coal does go down significantly from 54% to as little as 11%, but it is not completely phased out. And for the most part, the vision is that nuclear power will take over as the predominant source, with some growth in renewables, but not very significant or not overwhelming growth. And there's some reasons for this. The history that I mentioned, but also there's very close relations between the energy industry actors and the Ministry of Industry and Trade, to the extent that there's even this revolving door issue. People who once worked in the Ministry of Industry and Trade often leave, when they leave their post, they go and work for the largest energy companies on the boards, for example, and vice versa. People from formerly working in the energy industry oftentimes find positions in government. And another issue kind of in the background here is that the main actors at the governmental level give much more preference for energy security rather than sustainability. So their emphasis is really on having as much domestic energy sources as possible, because those are seen as secure, whereas the environmental considerations are less important. And another factor is that the Czech Republic does have a bit of a poor history when it comes to rolling out renewables. That's something I can, if anyone's interested in, can go into more detail afterwards. But basically, it kind of got burned in the past, and so it's skeptical about renewables and their potential in the future of the Czech energy mix. And then finally, there's we could say a sort of a lack of public interest engagement in this topic, or at least an unclear kind of public opinion about the Czech Republic's energy future. But this vision, there are some key problems. First of all, the assumptions that it's based on don't really reflect the reality, and it shows sort of a circular logic, meaning that basically these targets that you see here were essentially set in advance of creating the vision in the first place. And so, basically nuclear fuel is seen as the future, and so all efforts are going to be shifted towards that. But that's quite problematic because there are a lot of difficulties with nuclear development, particularly financial. And then there's the issue of, related to that, the issue of the market realities in Czech Republic and in this region, and the impact even of the Energiewende in Germany on the Czech market. But the fact that they do envision this reduction, quite significant reduction in coal, does bring up the issue of energy justice, and how that phase out, as limited as it is actually going to take place. And what's kind of interesting about the Czech Republic is that, and what you see in these two maps, is that the coal mining regions are also the regions that are most lagging behind the rest of the country in terms of structural development, but also in terms of economic and social vulnerability. And so, again, that raises questions of how to help these areas to transition in a just and fair way. And the main issue in terms of the mining regions is the issue of territorial ecological limits, and that's what you see in this picture here. So you see 3 mines in the northwest area of Czech Republic, and the dark brown bold line are the limits that are currently in place for these mines. And these limits were introduced in 1991 by a decree from the government. Unfortunately, though, what that means is that they are not legally binding. And so this is an ongoing political issue that hasn't yet been resolved once and for all. And in the Bílina mine, the limits were even extended in 2015 to this new line here, but much more politically sensitive and problematic is the issue of this mine here of the Czechoslovak army, because expanding this mine would inevitably lead to displacing communities in these neighboring towns. And so this is a very politically sensitive issue in Czech Republic. Unfortunately, though, there has been no clear phase-out agenda set by the Czech government. The limits continue to be not legally binding, and so there's always this possibility of further extensions. And there's also the issue that coal does continue to play a significant role in the Czech electricity sector, but also in Czech heating sector. So what can we do about this? There have already been some positive signs that we can point to. For example, generational changes in the ministries and energy companies. As younger people join these institutions, the mindset is changing, albeit quite slowly. The other thing that we can look at is that there is a strong presence of these anti-status quo actors at the local level. So, for example, it could be like Greenpeace. There's other similar environmental NGOs that are active at the local level, but even within local politics, for example, in the mining regions, the people there have representation that is in their interests and that fights against, for example, the expansion of the mining limits. And then there's this Restart program, which is a program of the government plenipotentiary. And what its aim is basically to look at the needs and interests of these communities and to make sure that they have a voice in government and to make sure that a just transition is taking place in these areas. And so that's a good initiative, but it needs more stability. It needs more finance in order to really make a long-term impact. And so more is needed to be done. For example, to close the revolving doors between Czech industry and Czech government, especially in the energy sector, and to make plans and policy that is based in reality rather than based on desire for nuclear energy at all costs. And then also for greater cross-border cooperation, for example, with Germany. And then a few other things that I would mention is to improve community engagement within energy decision-making, stronger support for alternative energy investment. The Czech Republic is a country with strong entrepreneurship. And so if the government were to really create a good investment environment with clear rules that allowed for newcomers into these markets, that would be a great thing to see. And then finally, as Anna mentioned, education and individual political engagement. And I think that will play a strong role, especially in kind of further pushing this generational change in government and in energy companies. And here are the sources that I used for this. And so thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Colin. And let's see here. Wait, we gotta do the reaction, the clap. There we go. So great job. And I really like I like everyone's presentations, but actually, can you go back to the maps?
Sure, yeah, sorry.
It's really important that you just have maps.
Okay, just a second. Oh,
Okay.
no, wrong presentation.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I thought it would be a bit easier.
No worries, it's right here. I just opened the wrong one.
If we were in person at CEU with our touch screens, it would take us a few minutes anyways to move things around. So
here, I've almost got it. There we go. So you should be able to see the presentation again and the maps. Yeah, so I guess maybe these two or the one.
I can't see. I don't know. Okay, here it goes. Okay. Hey, so I want others to ask questions too, but my opening question for you is simply, what is the influence of Germany? And I mean, maybe this is not so measurable, but maybe it's more your impression of what's the influence of Germany on Czech Republic energy policy, like phasing out coal and bringing in renewables more, just because it's neighboring, and I don't quite understand the dynamics there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could say that the Czech government and Ministry of Industry and Trade, they basically look on the Energiewende and Germany's energy system in frustration and not favorably. And the reason for that is that because of the extensive rollout of renewables, especially wind in Germany, which well, basically it causes problems for the Czech Republic, because if you have these surges in wind energy and the German grid isn't able to fully utilize that, then it gets pushed into Czech Republic. And the Czechs are not happy about that, let's say. But also that's something that's measurable in terms of the electricity that goes across the border. But the other thing is that it affects the wholesale electricity prices in Czech Republic. And what we see is basically the wholesale electricity market in Czech Republic and Germany are synced. And that's important, especially in terms of the issue of nuclear energy in Czech Republic, because it disrupts the whole market dynamics, and it essentially means that the stability of the wholesale market is affected, which means that it's less financially sound to develop nuclear energy, even though that continues to be the vision that the Czech government pushes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Others, is there one more question about this?
May I ask?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm really interested in your presentation. I would like to ask, which factors do you think that can accelerate the goals of energy by 2040?
You mean according to the Czech government plan?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the problem with the vision that they have is that it's not.
I mean, but if you don't mind, I mean, particularly, how can we accelerate to reach the prospective data by 2040 according to this strategy? Which sectors that we have to force, or we have to make a global cooperation between multinational companies, or I hope that you understood me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the problem really is that this whole vision that the Czech Ministry of Industry and Trade envisages, that sees for the future for 2040, is really not about any kind of global cooperation or transition. That's kind of the problem. It's not, it wants to shift towards nuclear energy, but there's a lot of problems with that. Like I explained in response to Michael's question, right? So developing nuclear energy, the problem is it's very cost intensive, at least at the front end, and it just doesn't really make financial sense under the current market realities, right? So potentially maybe they could promote nuclear energy, but it would also need to be done still with cooperation with Germany, for example, to somehow kind of stabilize the grid, let's say. So maybe there's room for somehow cooperating with Germany so that, you know, Czech Republic could have the nuclear base power and Germany would have the renewable wind. But of course, because of the Energiewende and Germany's shift away from nuclear, I'm not sure if that's really something that they would be on board with, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I answered your question.
You know what, I think I'm going to pick up on that question later on as well, and ask the other presenters about that. So about what can be done in the next few years, really, since that's kind of the theme of today's talks. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's turn to Roxana Bucata. And Roxana, I just give it to you to talk about Romania. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. I am really happy I have this opportunity to share some of the insights from my research, which is focused on, which is about Jiu Valley. I hope you can see my screen and the presentation. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Thanks. So I will present to you the case of Jiu Valley, which is a coal region in southwest Romania. So I would say Jiu Valley is the most emblematic coal region in Romania. You can see on the map that I posted on this slide. It's in the middle of Carpathian Mountains. It's a valley that has a population of over 100,000 inhabitants, and it consists of 6 small towns and as well as other small villages.
It's quite an isolated place from many points of view, as you will see. So for the first part of the presentation, I will give you a little bit of context about Romania and Jiu Valley, and then I will go into more detail about my research and focus on the results. Of course, you know, Romania is a European Union member state with a population of around 19 million. We have a diverse mix of energy, including almost all sources: coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear, hydropower, biomass, wind and solar, and so on. Coal is about 17% of the total energy consumption, and this is a major decline from 1990. There is also a major decline in the workforce in coal regions. The two main coal basins in Romania, Oltenia and Hunedoara, currently employ around 15,000 people, down from 100,000 in 1990. So historically, Romania is a coal-dependent country, and we still love coal because we are one of the EU member states that still don't have a coal phase-out target. Why I think Jiu Valley is important to study? So it's the oldest coal region in Romania, started around 1850, but it also had a second industrialization wave during the socialist regime in 1970s. So a lot of people came here in Jiu Valley from all over the country to work in the coal mines because it was a very profitable job. So the transition away from coal started after the 1989 revolution with the restructuring of the coal sector. And the biggest moment in the deindustrialization process was actually in 1997, when the World Bank decided that coal mining was economically inefficient. So decided to close a lot of mines. So yes, we can already talk about the end of coal in Jiu Valley. You can see in the maps here, in the golden times of coal mining, there were 14 active mines, and now there are only 4 left. In the second map, you can see only the 4 mines left, which will also close down soon. And of course, this comes with a very high social cost. There were no alternative economic programs after for the regional development after the mining closing down. Jiu Valley was designated as a disadvantaged area to attract investors through tax cuts, but this didn't really happen. For people, the government responded with redundancy payments, which was disastrous on long term. And there's a negative image of the efficiency of the retraining programs that happened after closing down the mines. And so people went into informal activities like collection of building materials and scrap metals, or gathering forest fruits and so on. And others migrated in other European states to work. But this is, I have to mention, a national phenomenon. It's not only located in Jiu Valley. So the end of coal is old news, but what's new is the just transition. So Jiu Valley is part of the just transition platform for coal regions in the EU. And these regions can benefit from the just transition fund of 14 billion euros in the next years. The Romanian government already published a strategy for the sustainable development of the Jiu Valley, including concrete projects, including professional reconversion, alternative industries, so on and so on. And also what's new is that NGOs are involved now in facilitating this communication between government, local community, and European Union. And there is also a very strong local civil society involved, mainly in reclaiming the cultural mining heritage. So my research, what is it about? It's about the professional reconversion program started in 2019 for 5,000 miners and former miners, with the aim of training them as wind power technicians and employ them in wind power industry in Romania and other countries. The program was started by the Romanian Wind Power Associations, that includes many companies, Romanian Ministry for Energy, University of Petroșani. So I conducted a qualitative study of the first year of the implementation of the program, and I interviewed 15 miners and former miners, representatives of the initiators, and NGOs. I used this framework of energy justice because energy transition comes with uneven costs and benefits for people. So I'm referring to these three core tenets of the energy justice: distributional, recognition, and procedural. So I go quickly through these slides to get to the results, which is the interesting part. The just transition was first formulated by trade unions, but it's already an internationally acknowledged concept. The Paris Agreement stipulates to take into account the imperatives of a just transition of the workforce. And retraining workers is one of the necessary elements for a just transition, for a just energy transition. Here I put some of the the kind of information that I gathered from my interviews, and it's about attitudes of people, motivation, expectations, their relationship with the other stakeholders, social challenges, livelihood options, and so on. So I will go into more details for some of these. The professional reconversion program, or how it was known as the Wind Power Academy, is actually part of the energy transition efforts in Romania, and is addressing the life of those involved in producing coal energy. It is an ambitious professional reconversion program, and it follows a string of failed reskilling programs for miners in the last 20 years. So the cost of training and employing one person is 10,000 euros. So the total cost of the program would be 50 million euros. In the first year of the program that I analyzed, there were no European funds available for various reasons. And also the government changed, so the program lacked the political support for a big part of the year. So in the end, the initiators decided to conduct just a pilot project of training and employing one person. What happened in the first year is that they organized some visits on a site at the wind farm in Romania. They also conducted a round of interviews with local people who applied for training. That is around 50 or 70 applicants. And they selected, trained, and employed one person, 26 years old young man from Jiu Valley with no coal mining experience. And at the time of the interview, he was working on a project in Sweden, no wind farm. So some of the results that I have regarding the attitudes towards coal and renewable energy, what I discovered is that the local community of Jiu Valley is largely aware of the fact that coal is history and energy transition is the new reality. But of course, they are still big supporters of the coal-based energy because they believe that phasing out coal is a political decision, and they believe that it's not the thing to do. It's just something that happens without their support. And they have a positive opinion about renewable energy, but they don't consider it as feasible and reliable as coal. And of course, miners who are still employed in the coal industry hope that this industry will survive until they reach the age for retirement, but many are afraid that this will not be the case. And all the miners I interviewed remember at least one other professional reconversion program in the past that failed, of course, except for the youngest respondent who was employed. About the motivation for the reconversion program. So I have to mention that I interviewed people who applied, but also people who didn't apply to the program, because I wanted to see diverse attitudes of people and motivations. I discovered this common response, looking for something else. Everybody was looking for something else when they applied for the program. But then I went into more details about their motivation. So some of their reasons are, of course, the fear of losing their job because of the mine closing down before reaching the age of retirement. Others were looking to supplement their revenues. Others wanted to find a job security for long term. Others were unemployed and were looking for a job, a steady job, preferably. One applied to the program because there are not many options for young people in Jiu Valley. And also some of them, as I said, didn't apply to the program. One, because he didn't want to take away jobs from young people. And two others were already employed. One was working abroad and another had a steady job in a state-owned water company in the valley. So as I mentioned, this program followed a string of other failed reconversion programs, but still people had high hopes when they heard about the program, and they were really looking forward for a better job, more secure, safer, cleaner, better paid, as it was advertised by the initiators of the program. And what they see a lot of similarities between coal jobs and wind power jobs, and are willing and capable to learn what is different. Underground mining is a life and death job, so they learn how to avoid fatal accidents in this industry, whereas the wind power industry is a safe environment to work in, meaning they are overqualified in this area. So after the interviews, the respondents never heard back from the initiators. They didn't get a response. Nobody told them anything after that, except for the one person who was employed. So they interpreted this deadlock of the professional reconversion program as caused by the national political changes. So in their eyes, this was another failure and lost hope. About the impact of the program, I could see that the program has a major potential to positively impact people's lives, but the real impact of the program was minor, at least in the first year, because it only employed one person. But more than that, I saw a disconnection between people's expectations and initiators' intentions, in the sense that while people miners were confident on their skills and their potential to adapt to a new industry, the initiators were actually looking for criteria that most miners and former miners do not meet, namely young age and English language proficiency. So these are some of the results that I selected and detailed for you. I'm available for questions, and I hope I didn't spend too much time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roxana. Thank you very much.
I'm a little tired.
Okay, sorry. Did I talk? I have trouble with my internet. I hope
No, don't worry. I'm trying to stop the screen share.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good luck. that's all I'll say. Maybe Barbara can help. I have no power or authority here. So, okay. Roxana, my one follow-up question with you is, and you kind of addressed this slightly about the Green Deal, but and maybe you could update us a bit. Do you think that under the Green Deal, there's maybe a greater focus and greater hope that the people in the Jiu Valley should have about a just transition?
Yeah, definitely. There's a new wave of hope in Jiu Valley because of the Green New Deal, and the Green Deal is the thing that pushes this just transition. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen at all. So I guess there is hope, and but things are going slowly, and but it's promising because, as I said, NGOs and especially local NGOs are really involved and active, and it feels like this time things will go better for Jiu Valley.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And then I wanted to I'm going to ask Anna this one question, then I'm going to open it up to everyone else. This one's from Lorianne. Or Lorianne, did you want to ask the question yourself? It's in the chat.
Yes, hello. Thank you for giving me the floor. I asked the question at the end of your presentation a bit too late, Anna. And my question was kind of reacting on what you said regarding this focus that has been this idea of citizens and consumers, this difference. And what I've seen from European legislation is that there's been much a focus on vulnerable consumers and this consumer linguistic in legislation, which seems to change now with more focus on vulnerable communities maybe. But I wonder if you would say that in the European discourse at the EU level and also regarding the Green Deal, you see a shift in the way we talk about vulnerable consumers versus vulnerable citizens and this empowerment right that you talked about.
Thank you, Lorianne, for the great question, and nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
This is a great question. I would say there is some kind of a trend, but it's not there. What actually I mostly realize, and this is through working on a Horizon proposal with Michael, is that we were developing a proposal about energy citizenship, and we wanted to kind of capture everything that a citizen can be in terms of energy, like from vulnerable and so on. But I think from the kind of a feedback and even from the call, I saw that when we talk about vulnerable, it's mostly consumers. But when you talk about citizens, it could be something like energy communities, but it is about, there is a trend to commercialize that. So I've not seen a clear vulnerable community in sense of kind of empowering them and so on. I don't think it's still there. Maybe the idea is there, but in terms of, because with this Horizon call, we saw like it's a lot of funding put into place to make sure something happens in the field or research and activist point of view, but I see that it's not there. It's still, energy community seems to be commercialized, something that has to be a business oriented, and I think still vulnerable, my view, vulnerable consumers are mostly consumers rather than citizens.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your great answer.
Okay, thank you. Other questions as well. You can also type them in the chat if you'd like to. And if you could raise your hand, maybe that's useful. And Varvara, she raised her hand. So go ahead.
Thanks. Well, I have one quick question until the audience are still trying to, somehow think about this presentation. First of all, thank you all for presentation because they were really insightful for me. I'm not focused on these particular countries, but also we can see some consistencies among all the presentations, and it's very insightful. But my question was about maybe, some local practices, some local good practices that you maybe know in, for instance, Czech Republic or Romania or Austria or Macedonia that are that could be some kind of inspiration for these coal-intensive communities, to recover and to go into next phase, like phase coal out. If you know some, even though they're local, it would be interesting for me to hear about that. Thank you.
So I could maybe answer first, I guess. I only briefly mentioned it, but I think this would be a good kind of example case for the Czech Republic was this restart program, and its whole goal really is to help, especially these areas of the country and the coal mining areas, to help them transition away from coal, because it's clear that it's going to happen. Even in the Czech case, where the phase out isn't really like hard policy yet, it's clear that it's something that is happening, and they're very focused on getting funds to these regions, but not just that, but having kind of a clear and complex vision for how to help these communities and to make sure that the local economies transition not just to one new industry, which could later on lead to this whole issue once again. And there were examples of that in other coal mining regions that transitioned away. For example, they transitioned to the automotive industry, but now there's issues about, well, what's the long-term future of that? And so this restart program is really, focused on having this more complex vision of different, kind of having a diverse transition, let's say, so that there's a lot of different economic stimulus going into these places. And part of that is about redirecting EU funds as well, which relates to the Green Deal and other structural funds.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, maybe from your perspective in North Macedonia as a non-member state, how does that look?
I think like I also have a very good example. So it's like, I don't know how good it is, but it's really about a kind of a niche or like even bottom up. So when previously we had the previous government, conservative government, so there was they were out of 81 municipalities, there were only 4 who were in the opposition. And I saw, especially one of them, there was like a really big, and it was all come down to this one person. So he was a civil servant working in this municipality and in the capital, and like he's engineer, he's like not a kind of anyone, he's not like a decision maker in that sense, but he's ran all the energy efficiency programs that the municipality had. And actually just because of his initiative, and like his small team, he like really worked with a lot of NGOs and a lot of international donors. And what they made like for 4 years, so more or less, they kind of insulated several blocks, and this was actually funded. So 90% was donor funded. Then they also tried to make, so then a little bit politics came into place, so they weren't able to do all they wanted to do even a local gasification project, because households in North Macedonia don't have access to gas to heating, so it's that's why there's a fuel with electricity. But I'd see is and I know this person, it just comes down to one person just showing this interest, and attract a lot of funding and attract like international donors and kind of a lot of support that they get, although they were limited because some of the funds they get from the government, and there was this bit of a political games into it. But I would think it really comes some cases maybe a bit to personalities, but another way I think it's positive and inspiring. So if you want to do something in your community, you can try do it, and then there are a lot of, hopefully you will track kind of a network that would support you in that.
Okay, great. And actually, Roxana, feel free to answer the question or not.
Yeah, I think it's connected, the question in the chat, with the question of Varvara's question. So I would like to give this nice example from Jiu Valley of Planeta Petrila, which is a local group of people who are working for a few years now towards reclaiming the mining heritage. So I think their initiative is very nice, because they are aware that coal is the end. I mean, the end of coal is already here. So, but they don't want to destroy this heritage. They want to save it and involve it in the future development of Jiu Valley. So their vision is that the future of Jiu Valley is a cultural one, because they are a group of artists and architects and but local people. And they are also part of this big initiative, Involved Jiu Valley, which consists of dozens of NGOs with projects in many areas: education, culture, you name it, anything. So I really, so the bottom up in movement in Jiu Valley is very active. So I think this is a promising aspect of the story.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to return to, now we have 2 questions in chat, but I want to go to this question from Rosa and give it to Anna first. about framing the just transition by NGOs or youth grass or groups advocating for energy transition. How do you, and I know you've worked with NGOs and have worked and a part of an NGO, and how do NGOs, say in North Macedonia or more generally, frame this just transition?
I think that they can be a really powerful actor and powerful ally. I kind of briefly mentioned that there were like a lot of social movements going on in Europe. But what I've also been part of in North Macedonia was that and it was kind of socially motivated. But then if you see their slogan of this, it was about a civil society organization that was funded, a social movement that was funded, mostly firstly because the energy prices went up and people really could not pay them. And then it just created this social movement that actually they had two key messages. One is like dignified life, social life. The second one is like, we want to have just elements. We want to have kind of a renewables. We want to have sustainability. And this was they, and with them, I also ended up in the parliament proposing a draft law. Didn't got passed. It was a bit of a political thing, but it was a really exciting moment of democracy, using the right to propose a law. And we went to the parliament and we debated all these issues. But one better example comes from Barcelona, which I also studied a little bit. So it was a similar trend that people were kind of pressured by the monopolies, and there was a lot of a big increase of energy prices. And they went on the streets, they protested, and they actually managed to get a law passed. And this law protects vulnerable consumers from being disconnected from energy. So if you're a vulnerable consumer, for example, a recipient of social welfare or similar conditions, then you cannot just be disconnected if you cannot pay the energy bills. And they actually are didn't just pass this law, they actually are very keen into making sure this law is well implemented.
Okay, great. I like that explanation, and even the attempt, right, to actually change the law by NGOs. And Colin, maybe what's the situation there? How do you in Czech Republic?
Sure. Yeah, environmental NGOs in particular are very active, especially at the local level. They have some national presence as well, but less so because the national discourse tends to be dominated by the energy industry incumbents. But definitely they have a stronger presence at the local level. And I myself haven't done any research about their framing, but my colleagues have, and I'm familiar with that. And the environmental NGOs, they, in their framing of not just transition, but this whole issue, they tend to emphasize, you know, the local impacts of the coal mining, negative environmental impacts. And they also refer to the just transition itself as something desirable. And they have a very kind of anti-status quo kind of discourse that they use, which is in some cases quite extreme, really about restructuring the whole economy and you know, a hardcore kind of transition away from fossil fuels. And then the other thing that my colleagues have found is that there is a real antagonistic policy setting basically in Czech Republic, where you have the incumbents and you have the things that they tend to emphasize in their discourse, and there are certain publications that match up with them. And then you have the environmental NGOs who are clearly distinct, and there's not a lot of kind of cooperation across those two groups. And so that would be maybe another thing that really needs to happen in Czech Republic, is that government needs to function much more as a bridge between these different interests, rather than the current situation where it's really more kind of tied in with the industry actors.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then maybe this begins to tie into the next question that's in the chat, and this is about capitalism and our current consumerist, I would say, culture here. What does it prevent any major improvements in relation to climate change? And I want to partially maybe reframe the question and open it up, but But when we talk about capitalism, and I mentioned earlier at the very beginning about our abstract and our empirical discussion, largely it's been empirical, but now we can switch to a bit more abstract, right? And that is, we could even talk about shades of capitalism. And I think here with our presenters about Eastern Europe, right, there's definitely have the past 20, 30 years, this different consumerism basically, and that has been underway and is always shifting. And even here, okay, I'm in America at the moment. In the United States, we can see with Trump and his kind of climate agenda and how he structured the taxes or the legislation around tax relief, right? And then now we see Biden and his big infrastructure plan, which is really meant to tackle climate change and social justice issues. So we start to see that we still, of course, have capitalism, but we also see that the politics of capitalism or the politics of economy can shift in different directions now. So to help tackle in different ways how, for example, climate change, which is the most pressing issue of our time. So with that, let me turn it over to who, I don't know, we're running. I want to actually call him Varvara, but I'm going to give Varvara a minute to think about it because she's not meant to be on the spot, but I think she'd provide a good answer to it. So let me go to Anna first.
Thank you. Yeah, like I kind of underlined in my my conclusions that like this is the problem we have, especially from the point of view of just energy transition. So we have this system who co-produces energy poverty in cases, and then when we're like because previously the focus was on, okay, let's see who are these vulnerable people and to study them, like the focus was on them. But then like if we open it up, let's see, we are just by focusing on the people, we're just kind of maybe focusing on the consequences of the problem and not on the drivers of the problem. And in terms of a bit more environmental, I think it's I definitely, even if it's when I talk about just transition, I just cannot get away from this just element, even in like a climate change discourse. It's just because, for example, I showed an example of people using fuel wood, and they are contributing to air pollution. And there is a big in cities like Skopje and maybe, I don't know, and also like in Poland, maybe here in Hungary as well. There's like a bit of a debate, like, oh, there's air pollution, how do we, but we do not know that vulnerable people are co-creating this problem, and it's not their fault because they cannot afford clean, modern, safe energy. So when we see this connection, it's really about just kind of how do we make the system more equitable? How do we make energy more affordable? And I actually hate this even like sometimes I use like higher energy prices. We cannot say that these prices are high, like this is expensive or this is a not high enough energy price in one country, because then you have to compare the income levels and you have to compare all we cannot say this is why one country has a higher price than the other, and the other should reach the market level. It's very contextual, and definitely it is about, for me, kind of a reconstructing and rethinking the system who produces this or disables at least a just equitable transition.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And with that, Roxana, maybe I could reframe it slightly a bit for capitalism and Romania.
Yeah, I was thinking about how to link this question to my research and this Jiu Valley case. And what I can think about is that capitalism is the one that brought the mine closing in Jiu Valley. Left people without jobs and left this high social and environmental costs, which nobody dealt with so far. So there's definitely a high cost that prevents improvement in our relationship. but not to climate change, but to just and sustainable livelihood in Jiu Valley mostly.
Okay, thank you. And Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe comment also, you know, let's not forget what region we're talking about, Central and Eastern Europe, where a lot of these countries, the energy systems that they have, there's a legacy of you know, basically the energy systems that they developed under communism as well, right? So I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's purely about capitalism, because you know the economies of these post-communist countries at that time were also energy intensive and industrially intensive. But I think you're definitely, I would agree that we need to kind of, I guess, rethink this very consumerist, kind of unregulated free market way of thinking, and we definitely need to combine our energy transition with considerations for, you know, reducing our consumption and kind of gaining making energy efficiency gains and so on as well. So that would be my 2 cents, I guess.
Okay, that's great. Okay, are there any last questions? And then
Michael, I guess you're
oh, actually, I wanted to get back to you. Oh, no.
Barbara should give her answer as well, no?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
I guess I can jump in. Yeah, of course. So, well, thank you for asking as well the perspective of, yeah, I can talk more about the perspective of Western Balkan countries, and what is first in my mind from your discussion and from this knowledge which I'm bringing from here is the importance and actually the function of the state as such. Because as we all mentioned, we went through different political theories and different political practices in these countries. But what is important is the perspective of country as an educator. And that builds up on, I think, generally the conclusion we could all make from this discussion is the education of citizens, education of stakeholders, of all stakeholders, not only, you know, like individuals, but also the groups, the NGOs, and all other to actively contribute to the transition, but also the general tendency, at least in Western Balkan countries, to think about the country as an investor, you know, and this completely shifts the paradigm. And what also Colin mentioned, I think that when thinking about consumerism, we should also think about electricity consumerism and our own contribution to it, and also the idea of demand response in relation to decentralization, which is one of the main ideas of energy transition, and also just transition. So these are all the topics which I think are just the pieces of puzzle in our today's discussion, but shouldn't be forgotten. And there should be also, like, as an answer to all the challenges we face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a nice bring it to a summary almost. And
Bravo, well said, Barbara.
Okay, my internet is weird. Yes. My internet is weird. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask that Anna, Roxana, and Colin maybe say just a few words to close everything out.
Okay, since I'm unmuted already, I would maybe just echo kind of basically what Barbara said is that, you know, we have individual roles to play as well. And part of that is in demanding better from our governments, and but also in terms of engaging in local politics as well. And that's, there need to be larger, broader solutions as well to this issue, but that's something that we can all do. And so I would echo that aspect of what Barbara just said.
Okay, thank you. Anna?
Yes, I would also join that message, and I would also point that we should think about the diversity of citizens in this energy transition, and like to help those that cannot be helped. And we shouldn't consider this as like something like a very fancy, catchy thing, but it's a serious, should be a serious transition or transformation, which I like the word more, in which we should make sure that everyone is on board.
I like the transformation. Yes. Roxana?
Nice messages. I would close with expressing my hope to see governments being more responsible in the future and incorporating just transition in the public policies. So that would be my message. And thank you very much for having me. And it was really a pleasure to listening to all of you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm going to applaud everyone so everyone can applaud as well. So with that, we definitely recorded this, and since it is being, I think, broadcast on Facebook, it's available there on the ERG page. Also, there's a main climate, Solve Climate by 2030 page as well. And not only our event will be there, but a lot of other events, all the events from around the world will be up there. So I suggest everybody to look at those. So, okay, I want to thank you, everyone. We had a really good turnout. That was impressive. It was over 40 people, and we still have 38 hanging on. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. And this was a really good discussion. And yeah, you can even watch it again. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you all, and thank
Bye.
you for
Thank you, everyone.
initiative to solve climate change, and also to our dear colleague Dora Almashi. She was not able to join us, but she made a great contribution in making this happen. So yeah, thanks to all.
Yeah, I want to echo. Sorry, yes, Dora Almashi. Yes, absolutely huge. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this event, and she was key. Not only our event, but other events in Hungary and other countries as well. So she really brought it together. So absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.